Welcome to Hello Port Wainimi. I'm your host Tom Dunn, and today we're doing a City Council review of the August 7th meeting. And with me is Mayor Tom Fig to review the agenda that we covered. Welcome to the show,
Good
Mayor.
morning, Tom.
We had quite an audience. It was a full pack. There was a lot of issues discussed. So let's start covering them. And the first one was, this was in closed session before the public meeting, and the laws or the city protocol is that if there's anything the public needs to know from those meetings, it's to be brought out in public. And this concerned the property on Surfside 4 Drive that is up for sale. I believe that's a correct term.
Well, it's property that the city owns at the west end of the beach, right adjacent to the flag monumentation. As you turn the corner from Market Street onto Surfside, the city has a large parcel there somewhere in the vicinity of 3 acres. And we have been investigating potential development of that property for visitor serving uses. And we have received a proposal from a hotel developer. And so after discussing the basic concept that he had in mind and working with the Harbor District on a possible inclusion of office space for them, a possible World Trade Center component, and then looking at the credentials of the developer, we felt that there was sufficient interest and credibility in what was being suggested that we authorized a 90-day exclusive period to negotiate an agreement that then would come back to the City Council and would be fully vetted publicly. So this was the first step of a series of steps that will have to be taken if this property is to ultimately be developed. So this was merely an authorization to start that process, and we have 90 days to conclude some sort of agreement between the parties that, like I say, will then come back to the council.
The next item, or the first item that we want to cover on the open agenda was the successor agency. It's a refunding bond type of issue. Can you explain a little bit about that and how that's going to help the city?
Okay. First, as most people are aware, redevelopment has been eliminated. The state has chosen to terminate redevelopment in California, and that goes back in year 2011. But there's still what I call wind-down activities. The city, through its former redevelopment agency, had sold bonds to underwrite the expense of a number of our redevelopment projects. Those bonds have been fully sold, but they were sold at a time when the interest rates were higher. So there's an opportunity now to refund the bonds, meaning basically to refinance the bonds at a lower interest rate, which will then translate to savings in the cost of having to pay the bondholders. What does that really translate to? It's estimated somewhere between $60,000 and $70,000 a year would be the savings to the city of Port Wainimi in its general fund, which is our most important fund that covers the expenses of basic municipal operations. But we're not the only beneficiaries. There are other taxing entities, the county at large and the schools collectively would be receiving upwards of $100,000 to $110,000 a year in benefits. And so and that was part of the discussion, is that, well, we're not compelled to refund the bonds, and yet it's these other agencies will receive the lion's share of the benefit. Shouldn't they offer up an opportunity to repay the city so they can benefit from this refunding? And the long and short of it, after a lot of discussion, is we got to look out for ourselves right now. And so let's don't get overly ambitious or greedy in wanting to capture all of the benefit. Let's take what's rightfully ours, because $60,000 to $70,000 a year is very important to the city's general fund. So it was a unanimous approval to move forward on the refunding.
I think it was a Greek philosopher that said, a bird in the hand.
You betcha. I had to be
I can't
convinced
remember
of
which
that.
one, yes.
Yeah, because I was kind of the lone ranger on this, in that I felt that, particularly in some of our services, animal control is one of them, where we've been hit pretty hard over the last couple of years with rate increases. And here they're about to receive, that is, the county's about to receive 100 to 110,000 a year because of our willingness to refund the bonds. Well, maybe we get some sort of concession in the charges to these animal control services. But again, my colleagues convinced me that we've got to move forward and look out for our own interests, even if it means that others benefit from our.
I'll say they outvoted you. I'm not sure
Yeah.
you're totally convinced, but maybe down the road something can be done with that. And
Money's money, bird in the hand.
okay. The next issue that was discussed was the council's reprimand of council member Jim Hensley. And would you explain what that reprimand was and what is it going to entail?
Well, for those that may have seen the proceeding, it was unfortunate. It was troublesome because we are making some progress on a lot of the city's initiatives that kind of had flowed from the strategic action plan that was approved earlier this year. And but as a consequence of some unfortunate dialogue and criticism, we lost a key employee, Carmen Nichols, who has kind of served as the glue that's held our organization together while we go through this incredible transition of new department heads, and new city manager, new city attorney.
22 years.
So it was an unfortunate action that had to be taken. The intent was to hopefully to bring Jim Hensley, Councilman Hensley, to change the nature in which he engages staff people and the public in maybe a more respectful manner. We can't control speech, that wasn't the intent, but it is intended to encourage a change in demeanor and in delivery. As part of the reprimand, the council has decided to withdraw Mr. Hensley from the various committees and commissions to which he has been appointed in the past. And likewise, we have decided to withdraw his serving as mayor pro tem. What that does now is set the stage for the next council meeting, the 23rd, I believe it is, or 24th.
20.
Yeah, it's a week and a half away.
There.
I can't remember now. But at the next regular meeting, we will go through a reorganization process where these former positions held by Mr. Hensley will be reallocated among the council. So that'll come up at our next meeting.
Yeah, well, that'll be important because the city is moving forward on a lot of projects, and we don't want to break in that. And all these committees and commissions are designed for us to get the most out of them that will benefit the citizens of Port Hueneme.
Right.
Okay. The next item on the agenda was a presentation by Tony Stewart regarding the cannabis ordinance, a section of that. Would you explain
Well,
that?
you know, I was kind of backing again. About 2 months ago, the city approved an ordinance allowing medicinal cannabis businesses to come to Port Hueneme. Now, there's a series of things that have to occur before that ordinance can be fully implemented, and one of them is developing a fee schedule to receive compensation for the efforts that staff has to go through, both in evaluating applications as they come in, but then the implementation, that is security, doing quarterly or bi-yearly inspections and evaluations of business operations to make sure that all of the safeguards that the city is imposing through the ordinance, in fact, are being adhered to. Monitoring the cash transactions, because the cannabis industry is largely a cash and carry kind of operation. So it's critical that we audit the sales activity to make certain that the city's getting its proper share of revenue from those transactions. So long story short, this is just another step in the process of implementing the ordinance. And what we've come up with is we're estimating about $10,000 is going to be the actual fee to commence business, and the actual final dollar amount will vary depending on the nature of the business, whether it's cultivation, whether it's sales, whether it's testing, and the size of the operation. But it's about $10,000 is what the current analysis is indicating, and that will be charged up front by each of the businesses that apply to get a permit from the city.
Yeah, it's really good that the ordinance is so, it covers practically anything you can think about in that industry, and making sure that it's regulated and run correctly. And in there it says if the businesses don't comply with the laws and the regulations, they will not be able to do business here.
I can't think of any business outside of the cannabis industry that would be subject to the kind of regulations that are being imposed through this ordinance. And that regulatory apparatus requires additional staff efforts, both planning, business licensing, security through our police department. So there's a lot of people in play here, and I can't think of any other business in this community that will be scrutinized to the extent that the cannabis industry will be.
Good. The next item on the agenda was the city attorney presented two various proposals on how the city could generate some more money. Would you explain what he proposed?
During the course of developing the strategic action plan, one concept that was put forward and approved by the city council was to take a look at our business licensing procedures. And is there a way that we can provide inducements for businesses to be attracted to our community, considering that we're dealing with a storefront vacancy of between 20 and 25%? Can we maybe provide a amortization of our business licensing to induce backfilling these vacancies? What the city attorney has come up with is a different approach, and I think more effective, and that is transient occupancy taxes. Those are the taxes that visitors pay when they rent a hotel or a motel room. It's about a 10% tax rate. And then the second ordinance deals with the sales taxes. That's the percentage of revenue the city receives from each retail sales transaction in the city. These two ordinances would allow some of that money to be rebated back to the business operator who either sets up a business or expands an existing business or modernizes that business. And to the extent that those changes translates to more revenue to the city, that is from transient occupancy and sales taxes, that the increment of increase that occurs by attracting those businesses here, a percentage will be rebated back to those businesses. So it's a win-win. It allows to underwrite some of the expenses of expanding and building and developing new business opportunities, hotels, retail sales. And at the same time, we get the benefit of the added sales activity, and the businesses get a portion back as a consideration for them establishing a business here. So we're very optimistic that this tool can be used not only to backfill our vacancies, but maybe as an inducement to do things we can't do anymore, but we used to do through redevelopment. And that is that there are still pockets of distressed properties in Port Hueneme, and this ordinance could be used to attract new capital investment from private developers and operators to do redevelopment that we can no longer do. So these are two wonderful tools, and I commend our new city attorney, Charlie Green, for thinking out of the box, because this is a much better approach, I think, than the business licensing approach that the council endorsed earlier this year.
Yeah, thinking out of the box, creative thinking, and it's good to see that we now have people in Port Hueneme at the city hall and staff that are really working hard to increase our revenue and take the financial burden down from where it is right now.
Yep, absolutely.